hosted by I4CP, the Institute for Corporate Productivity. Great to see so many returning names and faces, as well as some new folks joining the call for the first time. We do have these, as the name implies, every week. Next Practices Weekly is something that we started under some different names earlier, 3 years ago, actually. Early in the pandemic, we were doing multiple calls a week, but it's great to be back with everyone every Thursday at this time. If you're not familiar with I4CP, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're a human capital research firm. We discover the people practices that drive high performance. We do that by doing both quantitative and qualitative studies across all areas of human resources, human capital studies. We look at organizations and sort of segment them out by their performance level, meaning revenue growth, market share, profitability, customer satisfaction. And what we like to do on our quantitative surveys is really tease out what the top quartile, the high-performing organizations do more often than the lowest quartile organizations, the low performers, and then really highlight those in all of our research reports, all of our member flash calls, and other ways that we get the research out. We are a member-based organization. You see here just a small sample of the logos of our several hundred member organizations. You see that it spans across a wide range of industries, also different company sizes, from the very large like Amazon or Accenture or Microsoft to some that are a bit smaller. We do have a healthy number of unicorn companies in our membership as well these days, as well as across all industries from finance to healthcare, technology, etc. My name's Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and I'm joined today as co-host by my colleague, Lori Likens, our managing editor and vice president of research. Good morning, Lori.
Hi, Tom. Great to be with you today.
Great to have you with us. And we're going to introduce our couple of guests here in just a few minutes, but we've got a few other items to get through. First, namely, as I said, this is a weekly call, so you see the upcoming agenda for the 15th, the 22nd, and June 29th as well. We're going to have outstanding guests from Dutch Bros, from Walmart, huge company, obviously, there at the end of the month. Next week's going to be an interesting one. Lori will be back with me, along with Catherine Brecken, another one of our colleagues, and we're going to look back at the priorities and predictions that the company made in our report that goes out every January, and just do a check-in and see where we're at, take a pulse on where organizations are at across their human capital research and practices. A couple of other things that we wanted to note today before we introduce our guests. Many of you know us as a human capital research firm. What you might not know is that we also have an executive search practice. So if you're looking for top-level, top-notch HR leaders, from the CHRO, your chief people officer, to the heads of DE&I, talent acquisition, learning and development, total rewards, maybe your people analytics function, we can help with that. We've got a great network that we've grown over several decades, and we have an executive search practice that can help with that. You don't need to be an I4CP member organization to work with us in this regard. So if you want to learn more, i4cp.com/executive search. And thank you, Zeta, for putting the link to that in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to you, Lori. We had some interesting new research that we did, a pulse survey, so not one of our major quarterly studies, but a pulse survey on a very timely topic.
Thanks, Tom. So yes, this is a survey that we ran last week. So this is really hot and fresh out of the oven for sure. This pulse survey we ran in response to a lot of questions and concerns being voiced by many of our members of the I4CP community who were really wanting to know how organizations might be responding to the uptick in anti-LGBTQ legislation, the rollback of long established regulations, just what is happening out there in the world. So we ran this survey. Most of the people who took the survey identified themselves as senior executives, so it was very much a seasoned group of folks who took this survey. We had 320 people who responded, and what we learned was, first of all, the vast majority told us that their organizations openly support the LGBTQ+ community. So we use that question as a baseline. And then the following questions that were asked were presented to those folks who said their organizations openly supported the community. So we wanted to know what that looked like. Let's get some detail on that. So this is what we learned. What does that support look like? So we had a pretty long pick list of things that organizations are doing to sort of back up what it is that they're saying in terms of we support this community. These are the things that we do. The blue box that my colleague Eric Davis put around those two items, second and third from the bottom, we thought this was really interesting that some organizations are opposed to some of the legislation that is being proposed or that's currently in conversation in several states in the US, but they're not really talking about it externally. More of them are talking about it internally in their organizations, which, Tom, we talk about this all the time. If an organization is making a statement about where they stand on anything internally, the expectation is that's going to be public, right?
Yeah.
But it's just a really complex and nuanced issue, that's for sure. And we definitely had a lot of narrative responses to some of our questions that really, truly illustrated to us how complex and kind of fraught this whole issue is for a lot of organizations and individuals. And then what's our next slide? I think we have one
So
more. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. This one was based around, communication, what you're doing on that front.
Right.
And then here's other ways that you're being supportive of that community.
Right. We asked about policies, specifically, what are you doing in terms of benefits? What's happening with that? So as you can see, most of those people who took the survey told us that their organizations are continuing to offer healthcare services specific to the trans community. They're offering the ability to travel, to get some reimbursement if travel is necessary. There's also some organizations that are taking a look at whether or not they're going to have events in specific states or countries or regions based on what is happening legislatively. So this is kind of just a state of where everybody is right now at this moment in time.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing some of those bits from the survey. Wanted to note, and again, thanks Zeta for putting some links in the chat. There were more questions than what we're sharing here today, and so more interesting data. We've got an article that I believe just went live either today or yesterday. That's available to the public, so that's the first link that is there in the chat. The second is for I4CP members. We're going to have a member flash call that will go through and walk through a lot of this data. Again, what Lori just presented, but some other bits as well. That'll be coming up on June 21st. That is for I4CP member organizations only. So if you're on the call and you're with a member company, we'd love to see you join that event. Yeah. All right. So without any further ado, I'm going to again turn it over to you, Lori, to introduce our special guest today and get the conversation kicked off.
Thanks, Tom. Well, we are really honored to have Grace and Kristine join us today. Grace Niwa is a Vice President of Global Talent Acquisition, Talent Intelligence, and Early Career at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. I also want to mention that Grace is a stellar member of I4CP's Talent Acquisition Board. We run several, how many boards do we have, Tom? Six?
Yes. Yeah,
boards
six boards.
Made up of the senior most executives in their respective functional areas. So Grace sits on our Talent Acquisition Board. And Grace is joined by her colleague, Kristine Mayle, who's the Director of Global Talent Intelligence, Sourcing, and Insights at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. And we're going to be talking today about Agile talent acquisition and capacity building. So Kristine and Grace, please take it away. Let's start by hearing about you and your roles at Vertex. So Grace, the microphone is yours.
Okay, thanks so much, Lori. Nice to be here. And thank you for the invitation, Tom, as well. So my name is Grace, and I've been at Vertex for about 2 years now. I'm in my third chapter of my career journey and have worked in startup environments, backed by PE and VC firms, as well as mid-sized biotech companies. Kristine?
Thanks, Grace, and thank you for inviting us as well. My name is Kristine. I joined Vertex about 2 years ago, leading and actually establishing the first ever talent intelligence team here at Vertex. Thanks to Grace's vision as she joined Vertex that time as well. I lead also sourcing and our insights team with our data analysts. And my background, I have a PhD in bioengineering, so I have the science side. I have a background in competitive intelligence and also executive search. So I kind of see this talent intelligence really being a combination of all of the different skill sets brought together. And so, yes, we're happy to be here and looking forward to sharing with you.
And Grace, Vertex does some very special work, some very specific type of work. Would you share a little bit with everybody about what that is?
Sure, absolutely. Vertex Pharmaceuticals is based in Boston. We're about 5,000 people, 80 billion in market cap and 8 billion in revenue. We're known for creating innovative medicines for cystic fibrosis, and we're currently able to help 90% of that patient population. We're still trying to figure out the next 10. In this space, we don't have any competition, but we are starting to move into other diseases, which include sickle cell disease, as well as type 1 diabetes and non-addictive pain, among others.
Thank you. Wonderful. So let's level set for everybody. Would love to get an overview of what the talent acquisition function looks like at Vertex. What's the size of it, and talk a little bit about scope.
Sure. So we are a lean machine within Vertex. Most of biotech companies put 75% of their profit back into the science. And so we do have to be lean, which is one of the reasons why we are focused on the capacity building model. We're about 55 people in talent acquisition. 50% are FTEs and the rest are contractors. We also have an RPO. I have about 8 direct reports, and 4 are functional TA leads who lead R&D, medical, regulatory, as well as international and commercial. We have 4 COEs, which is talent intelligence, early career, global executive search, and TA ops and enablement. And we work with everyone in HR, but especially with people experience, total rewards, and ID&E.
All right, so I know that you had a preparatory call with Tom, and we talked about how we're going to discuss what you're doing at Vertex in the context of challenges. So the first challenge being, how do you create more agility and efficiency with a lean, very specialized team?
Right. So we have so much data at our fingertips. Sometimes I don't think we realize how much information we have and that we absorb every day. And so besides the regular recruiting metrics that everybody looks at, I wanted to understand what type of data would be game changers for the team and how we can be more proactive with our hiring managers around diversity recruitment as well. So what would help me look at the data differently? I wanted to share 3 challenges with you and the approach we took to see our world differently. So the first challenge here is, how do you create more agility and efficiency with a lean and specialized team? A lot of our roles are niche roles, very hard to find, as well as there's a talent shortage in a lot of those areas. Part of it is that we're in cell and gene, and that is also a new area, a new platform. And so there are not many people that actually know how to do that part. So next, I decided, let's look at ourselves first. Let's identify, what does our team know first? And then, because these are the people that are our heroes that go into battle every day in a very competitive market for Vertex. So how well do we know each other? What do they know? What don't they know? What are our strengths? What are our gaps? And what are our capabilities? And so we put together a survey and to gain a deeper understanding. And so here we have, we looked at their functional area of expertise. We asked them about their diversity recruitment experience. What experience do they have in early career? What disease area expertise do they have? Have you recruited globally? And do you know who our competitors and biotech peers are? Go to the next slide. So this is what we saw from a team capabilities perspective. This is actually what came out from our recruiter expertise by disease. Next one is recruiter expertise by job family. We go to the next, thank you. And then also the diversity recruiting expertise, as well as the global recruitment experience that they had. And if you go to the next slide, we're now looking at each recruiter, right? And so, yes, thank you. We can now see that each recruiter and their capabilities. What did they know about the disease areas? We saw that the knowledge of lung disease was high, but we were low on neuro and liver disease. What is the recruiter expertise on job family groups? These are the functions. Do they know GNA? Do they know medical, et cetera? What is their knowledge of the Vertex top competitors? Here we saw some gaps. We have some people who knew a lot, but then others who really didn't. So now what do we do with this? So now we're looking at the next challenge. And you'll see why we needed this data from our own team. So none of us feel that we have the capacity to keep up with the demand, especially when you have unexpected surges of headcount. And then also when there's a commercial launch that is pushed up earlier than expected, and this happens all the time. So normally, the ground is always moving underneath us, and we generally our teams are working at capacity, but that capacity is not always coordinated across the organization, especially also globally. Go to the next slide. So I thought maybe we create a capacity building model. And this is something I started with in my former company, but let's now take it a step further. And now Kristine's going to walk you through what we did.
Thank you, Grace. So one of the big questions and one of the big issues that we see is that not every rec is created equal, right? So when we're looking at two recruiters here, we have recruiter 1 and recruiter 2. Recruiter 1 looks to have 8 recs, recruiter 2 has 12 recs. A new rec comes in, who do you give the rec to, right? So that's our big question is we have a new rec, does it go to the person with the least number of recs currently? Do you give one more to the person that has 12? So on the next slide, what we did was we took a look at, could we actually identify a score for each individual rec that would allow us to understand the overall capacity for the individual recruiter? And so what we did was we looked at a number of different features or factors here for the machine learning model. We looked at the job family. So, where in the organization does this role sit? Is it a scientist role? Is it a commercial marketing role? We looked at the level of role. Is this a junior scientist or is this a senior director of MedChem? We looked at also asking the recruiters, what is the difficulty rating for recs that they had done in the past? So ask them to give us scores that we could use that as part of the model and the supervised learning of the model. And so that was a really great insight that we're using to tag. And then as we go forward, we're actually going to be able to use that to then predict future difficulties of new recs that are coming. We looked at some other data like historical data volume. How often have we recruited for this role in the past? So that would mean that we'd have a lot of data to go off of for the single role, or do we need to actually group it? Is it a niche new role that's coming, and how do we deal with that situation? How many applicants do we typically get? Is it a rec that we get a lot of applicants for? Does that mean that it might be easier to fill or more difficult to fill, even so? And then status, do we think about, was this a rec that took a very long time to fill and it's had a lot of stops and starts along the way? So we can think of a lot of different data points. We also incorporate things like location. We looked at, where does it report into? As Vertex Grace said, we have a cell and gene therapy, as well as we have small molecule too, and different reporting lines. So you're able to also look, are these roles specialized, maybe are more difficult or not within the organization? So this was sort of the features that we used. And used about 3 years worth of Workday data to develop this.
Kristine, if I could, a couple of things. One, I just want to note for everyone, please keep the chat open and feel free to use that to ask questions as we go along. I'll be keeping an eye on that. And I had one question actually to sort of kick off that mode. The data you've got here, I assume some of this is from your applicant tracking system or your core HR system. Did you have to pull it from multiple systems, and how strong was some of the historical data? Were there some gaps for some of the roles going back maybe more than a few years, that sort of thing?
Yeah, great question. So the data that we're pulling from is largely from the ATS, so using the Workday data. So we are looking focused first there. I will say that we switched systems about 3 years ago, right, to come into Workday from another ATS. And so really our data was about 3 years old. We did have to do some data cleaning, and also the fact that, as they get older, the ability for the recruiters to remember or even still be here and present to give scores to. So that's another factor that we had to consider. So I would say that overall the data was pretty good for our model, in the sense that we didn't do a lot of cleaning in that piece though.
Looks like we do have a couple of questions from the chat. One from Mary on that third item here, recruiter difficulty rating. I was wondering too, was that sort of more subjective, asking recruiters, polling them, or did you actually use things like, days to fill on actual past recs?
Yeah, so days to fill was used as a feature in the model to be able to predict. But when we used the recruiter rating, what we were looking at was asking them to rate from 1 to 5 how difficult they found that rec to be. And that allowed us to then tag that rec with the features to be able to then do the machine learning algorithm around that. And so we asked them really just to take a look at what they thought the rec difficulty was, and then we're going to use that to then go forward. When we think about the future of the model, what we're going to do as well is that in real time, as the recs are completed, we're going to ask the recruiters to then validate the score. So to help the machine learning model to continue to learn, so at the end of each rec going forward, they have to also validate that the score actually was correct or not, and then we can continue to build the model out.
Kristine, we had another question about data from Isaac. He was wondering if you're using real-time labor market talent demand availability as an input feature.
It's a great question. Definitely something that we would like to do, right? We work closely. We have talent neuron data. We've evaluated MC, Lightcast, right? So we have looked at that. I think the one challenge that becomes when you try to match the external internal data, we have to actually know, is this role actually equivalent to what role in the industry, and doing that matching back. And so that's definitely something we'd like to look at in the future. But that is one challenge that we have right now, is for doing it at scale. How do you know that this rec matches the external market exactly? And so something we're looking to build in as sort of a future evolution of the model as well.
I had a question myself. So I'm assuming that you had some hypotheses going into this, Kristine. Were there any surprises? Was there anything that came out of this that you weren't expecting?
It's a great question. I think that the thing that we weren't expecting was probably just how variable the overall scores could be for each recruiter, right? I think when you added up all of the scores per rec, and we saw that one recruiter who had maybe 8, recs actually was at the same rec capacity load as someone who had maybe had 12 or 13 or 14 or whatever the number is, right? So I think that for me was very interesting, just to kind of see that this model could help people to understand, again, that just the number of recs doesn't necessarily tell the whole story, and that we can really be able to be predictive and really be able to look across the teams and balance those loads. I think one thing that the recruiters, the TA leads, also really liked is that we can look over time. So while at a point in time, the rec capacity might be very high, is that sustained over 6 months, which might end up indicating burnout? Or is this a situation where it's up 1 month, it's down the next, we feel good about that, right? So I think going forward, it's just going to provide more clarity and sort of visibility into those types of data points as well.
And then we had a question about diversity. Do you have targets to increase representation? And do you have any plans to integrate the diversity recruiting pillar within all the specialized recruiting teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. Grace, do you want to maybe address that one?
No, you know what? That's actually probably going to be part of the 3.0 version of this, I would say. As also, we're also thinking about next year when we get the workforce plan, if we upload all of that into this, will it tell us a lot more and how to be more strategic upfront versus more reactive? And so these are things that we're going to experiment on.
Yeah, I love the iterative nature of your approach to this model. And I wanted to bring up this slide, Kristine, because this speaks to what you were just talking about, that one maybe learning or surprise, that, the difference in the number of recs can vary quite a bit. Based on all the factors from the previous screen, the difficulty of fill and other things. So maybe just reiterate that point here.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out too, Tom. I think this is one just sort of fictitious example, right? Where if we look at recruiter 1, even though they only have 8 recs, we see they're at a 35. They have a lot of 5s and 4s on their plate right now, whereas recruiter 2 has a lot more less difficult. So they have a lot more applicants that are applying to those roles, potentially have a lot more flow of candidates, a lot less difficulty to fill those roles. And so where you have a 35 as a score and a 32 as a score, if the newest rec is a 3, you may consider giving that to recruiter 2 to then again balance that 35 versus 35 as the overall capacity number.
We had an interesting question from Beth also in the chat. This is all focused on the recruiters. We saw the background of their skills and everything as the, what you did for challenge 1, and then applying that here. what about the hiring managers? Because usually it's a partnership between the recruiter and a hiring manager. Did you look at any differences amongst that pool?
So thinking about whether or not a hiring manager is more junior in their career, maybe hasn't hired as much as maybe a more senior, it's something that we're evaluating. I think that's something that hopefully, again, maybe models 2 or 3 may incorporate that as well. But it's a great point. I think intuitively we know that as sort of recruiters ourselves. But I think as far as how do you accurately demonstrate that is a direct relationship, I think is one of the challenges too, right?
Yeah, because it's one of those, all other things being equal, this could be an additional factor to consider where one might be feeling some burnout because they're working with certain hiring managers that are challenging in various ways, maybe, or in particular, just lack of experience.
Agreed. And then I think the next level of where we can go with this and what we're looking at doing with the capacity model and evaluating the recruiter capacity at an individual level is to think about setting the limits. And so what we've done is looked across, for example, recruiters of the same level, what should be the average capacity score that we'd anticipate? And so for here, for example, we have a 30 score. And so if we have now recruiters 2 and a new recruiter 3, recruiter 2 with a score of 32 and recruiter 3 of a score of 47, we can see quickly that there is already a potential for burnout if that continues at that high level over a period of time, right? So I think this is a way, again, that we can sort of monitor how recruiters are feeling, at least intuitively, or share with the TA leads to be able to have these conversations with their recruitment team as well.
I think what's interesting about this is when we see this, and we also have now the survey information of what functions that they have recruited in before, we're now able to look across organization on the team and say, Beth over here has medical experience as well, and her workload is not as high. Why don't we have them come over and help the other recruiter, right? So a bit more of an agile organization versus siloed.
We had another question come in from Lori Berninger. What about your talent sourcing team? How do you decide what recruiters gets the sourcers most support?
Sure, no, that's a great question. And hi, Lori. So for this, for our model, we actually have business critical roles as where our sourcing team focuses. So at the beginning of the year, the TA leads discuss with the business and the HR business partners to decide which recs throughout the year are going to be considered business critical. This can be roles that have niche talent, have a focus on diversity and increasing that within that function. It can also be roles that have just been notoriously difficult to hire for, or even builds that we're looking at, for example, too. So we have a couple of different parameters which indicate that it's a business critical role. So our sourcing team is really focused there. And I believe that in most cases, those are probably 4.5s or 5s on this scale. So they actually operate in some ways at a high rec capacity with a fewer number of recs for each sourcer is how our team is set up.
And so we have a great question from Robert, and I know that we were planning on talking about technology, AI. Robert is asking, are you using any specialized business intelligence or AI tools to make the recruiter's job easier? And I know that you are, and also that you're early adopters of ChatGPT, which could be a whole another hour-long conversation, but let's hear about how you're using AI.
Yeah, Grace, do you want to?
Oh, sure. So we're experimenting. And I also would say that on my team, I have not only Kristine, but one more person who is very familiar with the people strategy analytics teams, as well as the data science team. So they know how to leverage some of the data that we're gathering here. So for instance, we had 180 assessments of VP Plus. For those who are finalists of any VP role, we make sure that they do this assessment as part of the process. What we realized was that the score of those assessments didn't really tell us whether that person, whether they were hired or not hired, because somebody who was not hired could score very high, and those who were scored low could also be hired. So we were thinking, why don't we use natural language processing to see whether there's patterns of words or competencies that would show up, and that told us something very different. So that was a very interesting exercise. And the conclusion we came to that was that we needed to change our competency model. And so that was very, very telling. It's just another lens in seeing the information.
More broadly on the technology front, your use of things with what we've been talking about with these first two challenges, can you just let us know, I think you mentioned Workday. I happen to know separately that you all use Workday at Vertex. What other tools have been critical to this work?
We have Beamery, we have Seek Out, Talent Neuron.
Very
And
good.
of course, LinkedIn, yeah, LinkedIn Insights as
LinkedIn, of course, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, folks on these calls are always curious what the
Sure.
tech stack looks like for each of the innovative solutions. Had another question here from Seema. Thank you, Seema. Have you seen recruiter scores get improved as they spend more time with a particular job, family, or hiring team? So the more they're able to focus, do their scores improve, or is this still too early for you to be seeing some patterns like that?
I don't know, Chrissy, if you want to answer this, but I think it's too early. We're still at the beginning stages of this.
Agreed.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if those develop, though. I'm sure you'll be
Yes.
monitoring that and then making adjustments as appropriate.
Yeah,
Looks like
and
we
we're
have oh, go ahead, Kristine.
I was saying, and we're still working on, again, to training the model more, right? So this year we're going to be doing that sort of validation step of when the recruiter finishes their rec, they will then put in the score, and so that we will continue to learn as well. So I think it is too early, and we have other things that we're sort of building in to get better and more predictive. I will say too, Power BI is another tool that we use quite frequently. Actually, the capacity building model is in Power BI currently, and you'll see another one here in a minute. The challenge 3 is also built on a Power BI dashboard right now. That could evolve over time as we think about this capacity building model 2.0, right? So we think about this sort of bigger picture question that we're trying to address. We want to really integrate and automate what we're building here, and using machine learning, again, in a way that we can be more predictive of the scores for the difficulty of the recs. I want to think about this capacity building model that can look at individuals, right? Who should get a certain rec. So again, this is linking back to what Grace had said earlier about what is the capabilities of each of the recruiters, right? What are their experiences, and how can we connect back to a recruiter who knows X function very well? And so therefore, if there's capacity for that person, they have low capacity right now, and they have this experience, and a recruiter needs, to take on a rec, can we automatically assign that to a recruiter in the very far future? Right now, we're thinking about empowering the TA team to help make those decisions. And also think about the team, right? What's upcoming? So we have the workforce plan every year that comes out. Can we use this model to actually predict times of the year where it's going to be more difficult? Is it, April through June are going to be the most difficult periods of time, and then we're going to see a slowdown as we get into other parts of the year. How's the team overall? Again, the capacity of the team, not only within, say, one TA lead, but also across the entire organization globally. How can we think about the team's capacity there? And then strategy more going forward. How can we think about planning even for the year? How are we going to set up? Do we need extra support from an RPO? And maybe it's only certain times of the year, not the full year flat rate fee type of an idea. So we have that sort of built in as the capacity building model being this overarching with inputs from various sources, the capability matrix, also from the rec scoring model, and be able to really be more agile. And Grace can give some more details around that as well. Do you want to move forward, Tom? Thank you.
Thanks. So we saw that this was a very good opportunity for us. This provides the TA leads with a holistic enterprise view of their work, and we're able to avoid recruiter burnout. I just want to also be clear that we do not show this to the recruiters. This is really for the leadership team. And we give, because of this, we're also giving the recruiters a different experience. They're not just working in their function 100% of the time. They're able to experience working across different functions as well as internationally.
That was going to be one of my questions, is who sees all of this data. So it obviously it's seen by the two of you, but also it sounds like you've got TA leads, so they would see it, but the individual recruiters, individual contributors on the team do not.
Yes, exactly right. And that's where we're going right now. So the most interesting thing for me was, and one of my goals was, how do I create an agile, self-organizing team? I don't think the traditional team way of working really works as well anymore. And so when you provide data and the TA leads are able to see the performance of their team as well as other teams, they start to talk to each other. And I just hung back, and they started to understand the data. They started to self-organize naturally. And that in and of itself, and I didn't realize there was something called self-organizing agile team, but that's what, happened. And I'm very encouraged by this because they really need to be more accountable to each other and not just look at one leader.
Yeah,
I love that about, go ahead, Lori.
I was just going to say, I love that phrase, self-organizing team. I think that's great. Because mentally what I think is, oh, this is the antithesis of micromanaging.
Yes. Which recruiters hate, by the way, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Grace, can I ask you a question about the agile teams?
Sure.
Awesome. So we talked about self-organizing, but I also heard that you say that you don't share this data with the recruiters. So
No.
It seems like part of the self-organizing is that they have this, because part of agile is open knowledge and transparency. So if they don't actually know this person has high level of burnout and this doesn't, but how are they self-organizing then if they don't have that knowledge?
So it's really the TA leaders that are able to now use this data and work together, right? It's the reason why we're not showing it to the recruiters is because I think they're going to look at it as, oh, my performance is bad or good or whatever. That is not what this is about, right?
So the leaders, the TA leaders,
yes,
see the data.
Only the leaders are you. And usually when you're doing this kind of work, you're doing it for the talent, the external talent, but we haven't spent enough time thinking about our own people and what they need to develop, right? Because the role of the recruiter and the TA business partner is changing.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, if we go to the next slide, I'm just cognizant of time. So the third challenge was geared towards hiring managers. We wanted them to be more proactive about their diversity recruitment initiatives. A lot of times I look at TA and they said, you need to find us more people, more women or underrepresented, but I wanted to also put the responsibility on them as well. And so at Vertex, we believe that hiring for underrepresented groups should be accretive. And if you look at the overall data, sometimes you think you're doing really great, but actually if you dig another layer down, we found some teams were not represented well. And for this instance, the next slide, please, we saw that in the finance organization, there was a gap with women finance leaders. And so we decided to create an ID&E recruitment scorecard who can help the hiring managers proactively analyze their impact. And so Kristine will walk you through the next couple of slides.
So the first step, you can actually go back, Tom, really quickly. So the first step that we took actually was to look at benchmark data from the external market, specifically within finance. And so we took a couple of data sources. So Talent Neuron has a platform, right? And so it also can evaluate within specific locations, gender diversity. So we took Talent Neuron's data. We also looked at LinkedIn Insights, which also does try to estimate gender diversity. And then Seek Out is another platform that we use that also has an algorithm that predicts gender diversity as well. And so we took these three data sources, we looked at sort of what the minimum, what the maximum, what the average of all three of those sources was. And we found that about 42% of women within the finance department across really the biotech and pharma industry within Boston, again, because we are focused on, that's where the majority of this function was sitting. And so we had 42% women as our benchmark. So we went out with that data point. We created now using Power BI, a dashboard that can be a talking point with hiring managers. So our goal here really was not only just creating awareness of what that benchmark was, but looking at how do we take action and how do our hiring managers and our recruiters take action to really create a more gender diverse function. So this is a little bit of a view of how we present the data, right? We have a summary at the top stating, what the total headcount was currently, also what the gender diversity benchmark should be, and then what kind of gap we have currently. And so you can see, this is a fictitious example, of course, but we had about 33% women as our current state. So you can see that by the pie chart in the center, which is about 34 men to 17 women within this organization. Our threshold or our benchmark is 42%. And so when we looked at the gap, 42 minus 33 is 9. And then you can see at the bottom there on the right-hand side, we have a what if calculator, which would allow us to understand if we increased, hired more women, or if we lost women from the organization, or men, vice versa. How would that impact our gender diversity within the team, and what would be then the gap that we would see? If you go to the next slide or the next page. So this is an example of how we can use that sliding what if calculator. So here we said, what if we hired 3 more women into the organization? We would see that we'd actually improve. And so now we're at 5% gap. So we went from 33% to 37%, moving closer to that 42%. I think one great thing about Vertex and sort of the size that we are, we actually can see impact. I think that this is also one way I thought was a very unintuitive part of this tool, which was not just looking at a data point that's a percentage and a benchmark, but really what can you do, and what are the effects and implications of your hiring strategies? And so we can see already making improvement just with 3 women hired into the organization. If you go one more forward, we also did the opposite. So what if we had attrition, and what if 3 women left? So now we see we're going down to 29%, and we have a 13% gap. So again, this is really a way to have conversations with hiring managers really at the more leadership level as well. So looking at maybe talking to your vice presidents when they're looking at their organization across, how can they have conversations with their reports as well to think about an overall hiring strategy using this sort of a approach.
I think that what if scenario planning is just, it seems so obvious, but I don't think a lot of organizations are doing it. And I think it's genius.
We are very fortunate to have an amazing data analyst who's very creative and figures these things out for us. Again, we actually, as Vertex as a whole, we're very lucky to have a data science team that partners very closely with our TA team and HR overall too. And so I think that's one of the benefits, even with the machine learning model, we have data science supporting, we have a data analyst who can speak the language on both sides from TI and also from TA and also from the data science side. So I think that collaboration, that creativity is really key in us being able to create things like this. So
and more thoughtful decisioning rather than just like knee-jerk reacting. So we're getting a flurry of questions and comments. There was a question earlier, Kristine, about linking your diversity to business outcomes. Are you able to do that yet? What does that look like?
Yeah, Grace, do you want to take that one?
We are doing that right now. We really do take diversity seriously. We have a woman CEO, and she's also underrepresented. And so as part of our monthly report out to the Executive Council, we have not only showed the number of diverse interview panelists, as well as we are now trying to figure out how do we show the diverse level of candidates, especially at the Director Plus level, because that's where the gap is in our organization. And this is something that is discipline that we're all doing right now. And it's taken some time, but I'm really proud of the team for actually putting a lot more conscious effort into it.
Another question we had in the chat was from Martha, wondering again, technology-wise, what tool are you using for these what if scenarios?
This is Power BI. So this is a feature of Power BI that we're using here.
Yes.
Definitely, I think some jealousy out there from folks on the call in terms
It's
of what
Tom. It's inspiration.
Yeah, inspiration. Yeah, in terms of the tools, but also just the foresight and the people analytics folks that you've got at Vertex, which you all have been members of I4CP for a number of years. So we've had a lens, a viewpoint into many of the things you've done over the years. I know several years ago you ran a study on belonging and its actual impact on productivity, which I had never seen any organization do before. I work a lot with our workforce planning exchange, and I can say the idea of what if scenarios certainly comes up amongst that group, but far more often folks are saying, yeah, not doing it yet, wish we could type of thing. So
We had a question about executive search. Is your executive search team incorporated into this capacity building model, or are they kind of doing their own?
No, they are not included in this, but it's a good
Okay.
idea for later, I think.
3.0.
Yeah, it's not as many roles, and we know they're all difficult actually. So.
And another question from the chat from Amy, for gender, do you also look at impact by job level for the hiring strategy?
No, but we might want to look at that. It's a good question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting a lot of thumbs up and
Yeah.
kudos from folks too, saying that it's just, this is a great way to tell the story and invite
Exactly.
readers to determine what sort of the ending of the story might be.
Yeah,
And
you should package this and sell it. I love that.
Well, it really just is math, right? But I think when you see it visually, the hiring manager is like, oh, it's their decision to make. Now they have the information. It's usually the benchmark that they don't really know. So, and we're not actually rolling this out enterprise-wide. We're only picking the areas that we feel have more of a bigger gap to help right now. I don't think it's going to be an enterprise-wide tool. Okay, for us, commitment to diversity is high priority. Getting to the benchmark is the floor, not the ceiling. And what's important here is that we show data that the business can understand. That communication is so critical for us to have credibility. And if you go to the next slide, yeah, we can't wait. We have so much to do because our patients can't wait for the right people to find us. Thank you.
Well, I think we wanted to earlier. You talked to some about the assessments and the use of AI there. I was wondering, are there any other areas in TA, Grace, or maybe other areas of the organization? AI is such a hot topic. Is there anything else that you can share that we're using AI at Vertex? Sure.
One thing that we've been talking about is HR case resolution, and that is now we use AI there, and it's already automated 35% of the cases. So that's been a huge help. We're also looking at how do we create an internal candidate slate for roles like chief of staff, where we want to look at skills, people who understand how to navigate cross-functionally. And so we're right now creating a custom algorithm to look at internal candidate slates.
I think when we had our, go ahead, Kristine.
Oh, sorry. The other place I just wanted to mention too is around the pay transparency laws. Natural language processing to be able to understand how the external market is really compensating the talent and what the candidates are seeing out there in the market, right? So can we look at what our roles look like compared to, say, roles that are in the external market? So another place that we're working closely with the data science team, my data analysts, to be able to evaluate that piece as well.
And I think when we had our prep call, you mentioned natural language processing, not only for what you just mentioned, Kristine, but also just to find candidates. So scraping PubMed,
oh, yes.
Other scientific locations where maybe, if they're not prominent, a lot of, particularly academics, aren't always really prominent on LinkedIn. For some reason, even today, there's still this bifurcation in some ways for scientists and other academics they have their university conferences and university things they go to, but they may not be as prominent or easily findable on LinkedIn. So say a little bit more about that, your use of natural language processing there.
So that is something that the executive search team is actually working on, where we are looking for very specialized talent, maybe somebody who only does transplants. And it's almost impossible and very labor intensive to go through all the the PubMeds, right? And so how do we, pick some of the words that we know are associated or the networks of these people? And so that's been an experiment that we're working on. And it's actually gotten us some really great names that, like, as you said, they're not in LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. I would love to be able to address this one question, because I'm sure there's people on this call that would love to know a quick answer to this. Grace and Kristine, what do you look for in talent acquisition professionals to join your team?
Well, if they could all be like Kristine, that'd be great. But so I thought about this. I'm really looking for someone with a growth mindset. They need to love problem solving. They have to be data literate so that they can be creative around talent solutions. And I'm also looking for someone who's an optimist, a positive thinker. There's so much sometimes that will bring you down, and you can't go down that path. And so I look for that, as well as curiosity, agility, a learner, somebody who wants to win and get things done.
A learn it all, not a know it all.
Yes, exactly. There's got to be a humbleness to it because you're learning every day in this job. Every day it's different.
Yeah, no, I love that, Grace. And I think curiosity for me is same, right? That someone who's creative and curious and is willing to go deep. I think at Vertex too, one of the things that across the entire company, we know people will do well is if they can go very deep and get in the weeds, but also come back up and be at that high level and have the conversation strategically. So I think for me as well, someone who can kind of back out and see the bigger picture, but also go in and actually fix the problems. Sometimes it's hard to find those two qualities in one person.
Yeah.
But I think that's at Vertex, especially where people do really well here.
We had one more TA question coming from Mara. She asked, do you use behavioral assessments like predictive index to match candidates to hiring competency targets?
We did. We had predictive index for about 2 to 3 years, but we found only 5 people were using it. So we decided to take it away. So we are now looking at other assessments because I do think it's important as the recruiter, the role of the recruiter is changing. You need to think like a marketeer, and with automation, you're going to spend more time with talent. So I think assessment skills is actually going to become more important.
Grace, we've got about a handful of minutes left here on the call, and we didn't talk about this during our prep for today. But I'm curious, given your high level role in TA, and I'd be curious, Kristine, for your insights on this as well. You've talked about the next versions for your capacity building model and what you're going to be working on, but broader than that, broader than the model, in TA more broadly, what do you see coming up for the rest of this year? Where are you placing some bets? Where are you going to focus, and maybe going into 2024 as well?
So as I look to the second half of this, it's a great question because that's what I've been thinking about right now. We have to win in the areas of manufacturing, quality, because that is going to really determine whether we have the right people in the right seats that can take the new diseases that we're looking in forward. So it's critical. And so I spend a lot of time speaking to the business because I need to hear it from them as well to be able to help the teams. I'm step by step with my CHRO as well. She's in there with me because we need to know who's best to leverage to make the impact internally. And so that's a big part of it. I think getting the right people in the right seats. What we're going through right now is very low attrition. And so that means we have to be careful of the budget, which is another problem. So I tell the leaders, don't compromise. Do not compromise on talent. Make sure you wait to get the right person in the door. Makes all the difference.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think from a talent intelligence lens, right, we're kind of looking at the external market, external candidates, and what the trends that are happening in this space. And I think we've been seeing a lot of layoffs throughout the last year. It's continuing to this year. We're on track to actually have more layoffs this year than last year, right? So there's an element of how do we support the recruitment team on an always on type of intelligence as well. So one of the things that we're working with the TA team on is empowerment and really using the tools. So self-service around, LinkedIn Insights, how can they get information on Talent Neuron that can help guide their approach to getting the right talent in the door. And then how can we use some of those market triggers like the layoffs, like even maybe predictions, like if there's a failure in a company for a drug or whatever it might be, can we use that to predict a likelihood that that company might be unstable and be a place that we can target? So being in Boston, we have a lot of a tumultuous market here all the time. I think it's also growing, and we're going to see continued gaps in what the talent and skills we need in this market as well. We see a lot of growth from other companies here coming in, and also building, it's a very startup market, right? There's a lot of startups that are here too. So I think for me, like, how do we get more always on intelligence, integrate that data together into a database that allows us to really be proactive, get the data where it needs to be, the information where it needs to be, to support the TA team.
So we had one last question that snuck in here before we wrap. Thank you, Cecilia, for asking, do you focus on industry agnostic expertise? You've mentioned a lot about all the specific things in your industry, which makes a lot of sense. What about industry agnostic expertise that's broader?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, to answer that question, we are going into areas where we're looking at talent that do not have degrees, to bring them into some of the training for clinical manufacturing, or coordinating. We have to, because in Boston, there's going to be a shortage of those types of workers. And so we're starting to branch out, and that's part of the early career emerging strategies that we're working on right now, because our career paths are different.
Great, makes sense. Well, any final thoughts from you, Lori? This has been a great session, obviously.
Yeah, I just want to thank Grace and Kristine. I know you're super busy, so thanks for giving of your time and your expertise and sharing your story. And we hope you'll come back and give us an update.
Sure.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you
was
so
wonderful.
much.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you both. Like Lori said, great insights. You're getting a lot of kudos from folks in the chat. I'll just wrap by noting that we have an annual conference that I4CP puts on for HR leaders each year in March. We had a great event a couple months ago out in Scottsdale, Arizona. If you're interested to learn more, registration is now open for the 2024 event. Just go to i4cp.com/conference. Zeta has put the link for that in the chat. We haven't announced, I don't believe, any of the speaker lineup yet, but we'll be starting to trickle that out soon. We always have an outstanding lineup of thought leaders, book authors, CHROs, and other HR leaders. So check out that conference if you're already starting to think about your travel plans for 2024. With that, I'll close us out. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Grace and Kristine. Thank you, Lori, as a great partner for today. And look forward to seeing folks again next week, when we'll be back with Next Practices Weekly with another outstanding guest. Thanks everyone. Have a good weekend.